আমাদের কপি আর আপনারা হ্যাঁ এটা আপনারা করলে ভালো হতো আর আপনাদের ওখানে যা
এই আমাদের জার্নালে একটা সেট দিয়ে দিতে হ্যাঁ আমাদের জার্নালের একটা সেট দিয়ে পাবলিকেশন থেকে নিয়ে আসে জার্নাল পাবলিকেশন আসসালামু আলাইকুম কেমন আছেন? ভালো আপনার কমিটিতে আছে? হ্যাঁ is very proactive. সবচেয়ে কমিটি থাকার কথা না, মনের মিল থাকার কথা। মানে কমিটি গিয়ে প্রতিদিন ঝগড়া করতে হয়। হ্যাঁ, ভেরি স্ট্রং অ্যাডভোকেট অফ ইন্ডাস্ট্রি পলিসি। হ্যাঁ, তো আমাদের এখানে ইন্ডাস্ট্রিয়াল ডিভিশনের অনেক গেছে ইন্ডাস্ট্রি ডিভিশন চিফ হবে ডিসমেন্টাল করার জন্য না তো না, আপনি মাঝখানে বসে আমরা দুইজন ছিলেন। হ্যাঁ Assalamu alaikum. Let me welcome our special guest, Dr. Anisuzzaman Chaudhary, Special Assistant to the Chief Advisor. So Anis Bhai, I know him for quite long, actually. Probably at NSU, first time I met him. Yes. So when we were teaching at him, he was a macro person. And when I've been in touch with him for quite a long period. And Dr. Anisuzzaman is from Jahangirnagar University, Zulfikar, right? He's from Jahangirnagar? No, Zulfan is actually Indonesian. No, apni? I'm from Jahangirnagar. Yeah, he's from Jahangirnagar. Now, Zulfan Tajuddin is an associate professor at the Western Sydney University of Australia. And one of the issues with Dr. Anis I was talking, and this is an interesting topic. He is going to discuss today, present on the crisis, violent conflicts, and consolidation of democracy, lessons from Indonesia. This is particularly interesting for us because he was working since the fall of Suharto. So he was looking at the history of the Suharto's regime and how the Indonesian democracy was consolidated afterwards. And that probably will be useful for our researchers. So I thought this is an opportunity for our researchers to listen to this. As a researcher, you might see different angles of his discussion and probably pick up issues for your own research, because I think Bangladesh is also going through a very similar phase. and that will be useful for all of us. As for Dr. Zulfan, BIDS is a research institute I mentioned to you. We have with us in the audience not only researchers from BIDS, also we invite you, normally any public discussion, we invite others. So we have a group of research invitees who normally come. I can see Dr. Noor Alam, Dr. Mahfouz, and rest are probably all BIDS, right? We have people online. We're going to monitor how many coming in, but normally these are announced. Yes, it has also live broadcast on both YouTube and Facebook. So you can actually follow it up. Eventually, you can get a full, what do you call, audio recording that is there. So with that, let me invite Zulfan to present his topic. Let me also apologize to all of you. I will be here till 2:45, and then I will request Professor Sattar Mandal, no, or Dr. Kazi Iqbal, one of them will preside the rest of the session. I want this to be interactive discussion. I think you should use your research mind to ask questions and learn how do we see there are similarities in terms of what he will be talking about it. And probably we can get lessons for us. So with that, let me invite Dr. Zulfan Tajuddin. Oh, you want to? Okay, let me invite Dr. Anis. I would thought you will speak later.
No, this is not the formal space because this is a research institute. I'm basically a teacher, as you know. So even if it is being recorded, I'll try to be a little bit, not little bit, mostly informal, because that's how we can learn mostly. Let me give a little bit of introduction of Zulfan, how I came to know about him, etc., and his background. Zulfan was a research assistant for me when the change happened in Indonesia. I was taken by the United Nations to, there was a project called United Nations Support Facility for Indonesian Recovery after the crisis. So it was a very interesting experience, a small office, very small number of people, a few of us, and a lead researcher, and he just finished his bachelor degree at that time on regional economics. And he was attached to me, and a few others also. And what impressed me about Zulfan, I used to give him some tasks. Can you get this data? Can you do this graph? He always used to ask me, why do you want this? This is very important for the young researchers to have that mind. He did not just mechanically, oh, you said I brought it. Why did you? He would interact with me. Why did you ask me? Then I said, I want to say. He would say, probably there is a better source of data, or it can be interpreted better this way if the graph is like this. So I realized that he had the potential to be a good researcher. So I got attached with him. And then I found a research topic for him, which was not in economics. It's on conflict and democracy. For 3 days he cried. I'm in economics, democracy, I am not a political scientist, I'm, literally. I spent quite a bit of my life overseas, away from the family, and by myself. When I go for work, I don't want any disturbance from others. So I was alone. So I followed Zulfan to his. He used to live away from Jakarta. Just like, say, for example, for you to say from here, about an hour's drive, about 1 and 1.5, how far we can go. Gazipur or something like that. It's a town called Bogor. He used to live in Bogor. He's a student of Bogor University, very famous university. I followed him. He used to still live in a hostel. But he had a girlfriend. I had to go and convince his girlfriend first to convince him. So finally, because he couldn't say no to the girlfriend. Yeah, so this is how the relationship between supervisor and student should be. Very personal relationship. So then, and let me tell you, he doesn't regret. He did masters on the same topic from Institute of Social Studies in Hague. And I organized with Mansur, our Mansur Murshid, to take him. From there, he went to Oxford as a fellow, worked under Francis Stewart, which is one of the leading researchers on conflict. But he still wanted to do PhD under me. I said, you stay there. No, he said, no, I can't do anymore. He became dependent on me. So he did PhD under me, again on conflict and democracy and all these things. He published his thesis with Paul Craig Macmillan. And he's one of the leading researchers in this area of conflict and consolidation of democracy. He worked with Ashutosh Varshney. You may have heard his name, Ashutosh Varshney from Michigan, one of the leading researchers again on these similar issues. He actually examined the Hindu-Muslim riots in India. And then he did research on Nigeria, ethnic conflict, etc., etc. So Zulfan has done a lot of research in this area, so he's a well-recognized researcher. So whom you're seeing is not just someone from Indonesia, my student, former student. He sometimes keeps telling me, how many times you say, I'm your student, I'm now beating you. So I said, okay, you are now better than me, fine. So I don't remember. Yeah. Okay, it was fun. It was a good introduction for you. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a good introduction, right? And I didn't know that he was your student. Okay.
Yeah, we did a book recently together. He will show you.
Yeah, let me grab the book.
My turn now, sir?
Yes.
Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. It was a bit overwhelming. Thank you very much, Professor Namuhak, Professor Chowdhury. Let me start with acknowledgement. I'm the student of Bangladesh. The student of Bangladesh academics. I did my master at Institute of Social Studies, and I was supervised by Professor Mansur Murshid. I met him in a conference just 1 year before that one in Tokyo. And then I decided I want to go to ISS. And then before that one, I already met Professor Anis. And then when I did my PhD, and then I asked Mansur to be the second supervisor for my PhD. So both my master and PhDs are supervised by Bangladeshis academics. So I'm the student of Bangladesh then, if it is the case. Okay, I'll speak not more than half an hour, or about 25, 30 minutes maximum, and then I'll be talking about three big things: economic crisis, violent conflicts, and democracy. And then those three things actually experienced by Indonesia, my home country. And then I studied conflict to begin with during the transitions to democracy in the transition to democracy in 98, 99. So that already nearly 30 years ago. And then we see that one, and I'm sure that we will find a lot of similarities with what Bangladesh is experiencing now. So from that idea, I don't know whether any lessons can be learned, because what we see happening elsewhere, we cannot take lessons as it is. Lessons depend on those who are having the problems, and then how the knowing what happened elsewhere in the past can be used as a lessons. So my role here is to tell a little bit of what I know about Indonesia on crisis, conflict, and democracy. And then lessons to Bangladesh is actually depends on the audience. This is not on my hands. And with that kind of in mind, probably we will have more productive discussions. So I'm not going to tell lessons. No, this is not my job. I cannot do that one. And that would be wrong for me to do that one. So any lessons can be learned. So a lot of similarities. Look at here. Developing countries, post-colonial countries, Muslim majority. Look at the size. 285 million, 175 million. And in terms of the link between Islam, democracy, and development, probably Indonesia, Malaysia, and Bangladesh are within the same boat. This is where the questions about the compatibility of Islam, democracy, and modernity will be answered. Not in the Middle East, not in Africa, but in Indonesia, in Bangladesh, Malaysia. So let's start with the most striking similarities. When I saw what happened in Bangladesh last year, I was in Dhaka in May 2024. I attended the International Development Studies Conference organized by Dhaka University. It was at the, what is that? So the Pan Pacific Hotel. And then at that time, the mood was different. And I remember that I was told by Professor Chaudhry, you can say something about Indonesia, but don't comment about Bangladesh. So when I say something about Indonesia, and then I infer something to the audience, and the audience was laughing. So things work in their minds, right? So probably I don't need to be in that kind of mood now, 1 year after. So that's the good thing. But what happened in 2024 July revolutions, the regime change, transitions, probably not only one dimensions of the transitions, probably multiple kinds of transitions. We call it systemic transitions. And then actually, what happened in Indonesia in 1998, it was that kind of very similar. So when I look at what happened in Bangladesh only 2 months after I visited Dhaka for the first time, and then all of us, Indonesian, look at, oh, they repeat what we had in 1998. And then basically, you know that Suharto, the 3 decades army general that ruled the country with the authoritarian rule, he was forced to resign. Things were too hot to handle, and he resigned, and he stayed in the country. And probably this is that differentiates Indonesia and Bangladesh. Going to exile is not the nature of the Indonesian elite. The Indonesian elite, probably because of they are not attached to any of the foreign lands, and that has the implications of the capital flight. So even though they are corrupt, for example, they stole money, but the money stayed in the country. So, and then later on, it was called what is called patriotic corruptions. When you stole and then you put money somewhere else in London, in properties in the UK, I heard that 400 properties in the UK. I can imagine what would be the value. So it's unpatriotic corruptions. So patriotic corruptions is still better than unpatriotic corruptions. So, okay, so that's why I say that. President Suharto resigned, stayed in the country, and then he had somehow a difficult life after that one, and he died a few years later. And then Shah Hasina resigned and fled the country. So what happened in Bangladesh, not as severe as what happened in Indonesia in terms of the scale of the transitions, but in terms of the impact, human casualties of the uprising, and then the portrayal of what happened from the international perspective, probably what happened in Bangladesh probably more dramatic. So what happened to Shah Hasina, I believe that more dramatic than what happened to Suharto in 1998. So let's look at a comparative data about Indonesia and Bangladesh. So we take the 2024 for Bangladesh as the year of revolutions or regime change, and then 1998 for Indonesia. And then we take the 10 years back of data per capita GDP, and then look at what happened after that one. So the red line is for Indonesia between 1988 and then 1 year before the regime change, 1997 and then 1998, and then a few years later. And then parallel to that one, we see data for Bangladesh from 2014 till 2024. So you look at here, the level of development in terms of per capita GDP are very much comparable. But what differentiates is look at the scale of the economic crisis. So the regime change, democratic transition in Indonesia started with the economic crisis. Remember that Indonesia was the worst hit by the Asian financial crisis, worse than what happened in Thailand, worse than what happened in Korea, the worst in the whole of countries affected by Asian financial crisis. So look at the drop in per capita GDP. And then you look at what happened in Bangladesh. There was no drop in per capita GDP, only slowdown of the progress. And then after the economic crisis, you compare 2024 for Bangladesh and 1998 for Indonesia. Bangladesh is richer than Indonesia in 1998 in terms of per capita GDP. So this is very much a resemblance of the, and look at what happened 10 years back. It was very strong, robust economic growth. Probably the difference is only the time frame. Hasina only in power for 15 years. Suharto was in power for 32 years. So because of, and then we can discuss the different nature of what was done by the two different leaders in two different countries. But it took for Indonesia about 7 years just to go back to the level of the pre-crisis per capita GDP. So Indonesia now is about $4,500 per capita GDP. So this is the similarity. So, but if you look at the scale of the transitions and the crisis, the multidimensional crisis experienced by Indonesia, things were a lot worse than what is experiencing by Bangladesh today. Let me quote some data. In 1998, during the peak of the economic crisis, the currency lost 80% of its value. 80% loss of the value because of the depreciations of the current exchange. Inflation was close to 60%. Poverty rates jumped. Unemployment, the number of unemployed people increased by close to 30%. More than 30%, sorry. And foreign reserve depleted from $20 billion to the lowest point of just $10 billion, cut by half. So this
GDP declined by more than 30%, 13% GDP.
The GDP declined more than 13%, but if you take the per capita GDP, the number even
More than
even more dramatic because of the populations that decline. Yeah. So that's why I prefer to use the per capita GDP. That would be more comparable rather than just the total GDP. So from that perspective, in terms of the economic and social effect of what experienced by Indonesia back in 1998 is no way comparable to what happened in Bangladesh. So from that perspective, I think we need to appreciate what Bangladesh has achieved last year and then this year in terms of navigating the turbulence. And then if you look at also the scale of this is a very famous picture. Again, the next effect of the crisis. Indonesia was in crisis. Indonesia needs a bailout from the IMF, but Indonesia will have to surrender following pages of conditionalities. And then for the 40 billion US dollar bailout package, the Indonesian president at the time, it was in January 1998, just 4 months before he resigned. And then he signed the letter of intent with the IMF. And then this picture has been very well known in the region and criticized by leaders in the region, by Mahathir, by Paul Keating. And then somehow, Paul Keating, Mahathir was the contemporary of Suharto. Probably somehow he didn't want to see their fellow leaders to surrender. Yeah. So this is very, very, very famous picture, and this is for the bailout, the international dimensions of the crisis. Now, let me summarize what Indonesia looked like after 1998. So it was the fall of 3 decades of Suharto's authoritarian regime. And then what happened after that? His vice president took over as the president, and then his job was to guard the transitions to democracy. And then the new president prepared the first free and fair elections 1 year later. Somehow very much similar what is being done now, prepared by the current interim government. So it was the free and fair elections in 1999, about 1 year after the fall of Suharto. It was the first in 4 decades. And interestingly, and then we can explain why it happened. Soon after the fall of Suharto, even the fall of Suharto was accompanied by a series of racial violence, especially anti-Chinese violence in key cities in Indonesia. But soon after that, different kind of clash between different dimensions of cleavages just broke out across the country. The several regions want to be independent, especially Aceh, East Timor, and Papua, with their own unique problems, complain with the central government. And not only the secessionist conflicts, it was also about the ethnic intercommunal relations in different places in Indonesia, where they have a unique ethnic compositions. So you see mostly the burnings of across the country during that time. So the statistics says that it was the peak of the violent conflict in the country. It was between 1999 to 2022. So you see this one, what happened in the country. And then what follows, what happened after 1998 is basically what is called systemic transitions. The country will have to leave, will have to correct the authoritarian polity, transition to democracy. It has also depart from the centralistic nature of the governance. So large country, 260 million, and then govern with the centralistic nature of the governance. That cannot last. And then also the country decentralized. And then the nature of the economy before was centered around Suharto, what is called the crony capitalism. Now we call it oligarchy. But what different before was, the crony capitalists, it was surrounding Suharto. Suharto was in control. So the crony capitalists will have to follow what were ordered by Suharto. And then the worst thing, after the fall of Suharto, those oligarchs, they were untamed. Before they were afraid of Suharto. Under democracy, no one to be afraid. And you know what happened after? Those oligarchs will buy the democracy, will control the democracy. So you can think of which one is better. So you will find the shift from tamed oligarch to untamed oligarch. So that was the situations. But anyway, reforms was there to dismantle what is called the crony capitalism. I'll go to that point later. So and then how things settle from the systemic transitions, the episode of violent conflicts, then the country needs to go back to their feet. And then the democracy will have to consolidate, the turbulence will have to settle, and then the new social contract will have to be there. We call that one the process of democratic consolidations. So that's to make the long story short. This is just to show you the trajectory of liberal democracy index in Indonesia. Increased significantly after 1998, stable and improved. The peak was about in 2010, and then after that declining. You see there, just for the sake of the regional comparison, I put the data for Bangladesh there, and then we have the red line for India. Now, it was in 1998 and after. What about now? Indonesia in 2025. But reflecting on what has been achieved by the democratic consolidations, the country was once regarded as the most stable democracy in Southeast Asia. And in 2010, remember that it was during the start of Arab Spring. Things changed in Egypt, in Myanmar, and then Indonesia was the shining example of how Muslim majority country can democratize. But the problem is not consistently progressing well. Democracy stagnated, declined since 2014, even worse since 2019, and now Indonesia is in the hybrid kind of polity. And then I just quote a new phrase invented to see the hybrid democracy is a competitive authoritarianism. Element of authoritarianism, but election is there, opposition is there, but the return of authoritarianism is there. So this is what is happening in the country. And then what happened in Nepal we saw last week. Actually, one from the Twitter, I look at the posting, and then they said that inspired by Indonesian, because what happened in Indonesia just 2 weeks before or 1 week before, and then in Nepal, and then they ridicule Indonesia. While Indonesia walk, Nepal run. So you see that one, and then now is things happening also in and then when and Professor Chowdhury said it, not inspired by Indonesia, but inspired by Bangladesh last year. Now, any lesson to be learned? I just want to make 3 points here. The first one. What happened in 1998, and probably also what happened in 2024 in Bangladesh, we can call that one the breakdown of authoritarian growth. And my presentations last year in Dhaka is about temptations to the authoritarian growth. And the best example of authoritarian growth is Lee Kuan Yew's Singapore. And then after that one, probably China. And then many in the region, especially in Asia, they are tempted why we have to bother with messy democracy, chaotic democracy, we need discipline, and they just accept a kind of repression, and then let's achieve economic growth. And then somehow the period of Prime Minister Hasina probably can be called what is called authoritarian growth. But the risk of authoritarian growth is they are prone to breakdown. So what happened in Indonesia was the breakdown of authoritarian growth. Sheikh Hasina, and then what happened in Russia, for example, that's also the collapse of the Soviet Union, I mean, the breakdown of authoritarian growth. And only very few examples, the authoritarian growth is benevolent. Very rare. So now, the implications of this point of risking of a breakdown, and the breakdown is not only about the economic and social dimensions, but that also has the political implications. So the key point here is not to be entertained by temptations to authoritarian growth. What is best is growth with consolidated democracy, where a country will have check and balances that will be more stable. So that's probably the first point that I want to say. The second one, about the risk of violent conflict during the regime change. So in Indonesia, where the window for the risk originates from two things. From the first one is at the state level. We know that because of the political breakdown, it was at the weakest point of state institutions. The frictions among the elites, the clash between, say, different military factions and different elites, those who lost their power and then they meddle, they create chaos in the country. So we call that one the power play among the powerful actors during the uncertainties of regime change. Once the uncertainties are clear, they know what they can get, and then those of powerful actors, they will adjust themselves and then try to play using the newly agreed rule of the game. And the key to the risk is about how to achieve democratic consolidations and then to rebuild the institutions. Somehow, a lot of achievement have been made in Indonesia in terms of democratic consolidations and institution building, but later on, how the achievement cannot be taken for granted. Decay, the weakening, and then the interest of the corrupt elite to tear down the institutional achievement is there. I'll show you that one later. So let's have one more slide about the risk. This is a very unique feature for Indonesia, not necessarily relevant for Bangladesh, because Indonesia ethnically very diverse, religiously very much more diverse than Bangladesh, and also in terms of the racial. Bangladesh is a bit much more homogeneous in my views. They speak the same language, just one ethnic groups, and then much more homogeneous. So the problem should not be too severe compared to what happened in Indonesia. And because of those cleavages, Indonesia was at the brink of collapse. Indonesia at that time was just about 50 years old, about the same age of Bangladesh today, about 50 years old. So you see the similarities here. And then it was said that Indonesia was the potential Balkan of Southeast Asia. So Indonesia was in the danger. And then let's look at the cleavages. You have two things here. At the top, we have the divisive elite trying to play their muscle. Factions between the militaries, the all-powerful actors, or the oligarch, the key power before. But we have to understand also at the lower level, middle and lower level, at the civil society level, what is needed, and this is based on a study from India actually, what is needed to challenge the divisive elite power play is the presence of across cleavages associational civic engagement. So in the case of Indonesia, the connections between ethnic groups, between religious groups, between racial groups. So if that kind of connections are not there at the middle and lower level, the society will be prone for the divisive message or the divisive play that will be tried by the elites. So what was the incentive at that time? To flex the muscle of the elites because of trying to grab the new Indonesia that will be born after the chaos. So the process, say the first 5 years is really important to reach a new social contract. What kind of democracy, what kind of institutions, what kind of relations between police and the military, what role should be played by the military, what's the role of the multi-party institutions. So to reach a new social contract, this is where democracy facilitates. No one can dictate. It has to be based on the consensus within elements in the country. So that's about the second point. The last one for the lesson learned. The achievement of democratic consolidations is not without problems. So the consolidated democracy is not taken for granted. Why? Because of two things. And this is embedded in the problems of democracy in Indonesia today. The first one is the old elite, the old elite during Suharto, before 1998. So this is well-established thesis now. When we look at what happened soon after the fall of Suharto, and then what we have seen even after the peak of democracy score in Indonesia, this is what happened. The old elite class, the old oligarch, they have managed to reorganize their power. Before, they used to be in the context of crony capitalism, authoritarian centralistic government, and then within that setting, Indonesia managed to achieve long-term growth, right? And then what they did was, Indonesia now is a new democracy and multi-party democracy, and then they tried to play using the new games. So basically, what is happening, if you look at Indonesia today, the current president was the old establishment. He was the son-in-law of the fallen president in 1998, and then he was a three-star general at that time, and then he was implicated in the riots before the fall of his father-in-law. So the current Indonesian president is basically the perfect representations of the reorganizing power of the old elite or the oligarchic class. So that's the first lesson learned. So the consolidated democracy achieved by Indonesia is not taken for granted, and Indonesia is suffering from the democratic decline. And the second point here, and the problem has been systematic since day one. The transition to democracy is more about having competitive elections. Electoral competition in Indonesia is very competitive, even much more competitive than elections in the US or in Australia, even more competitive. So I said before that in terms of competitive elections, Indonesia is more American than America. But the problem is, if electoral competitions is not accompanied with sufficient, adequate check and balances that will create what is called imperfect democracy. And Indonesia suffer from this one now. What are check and balances? Two things are important: law and order, control of corruptions. Progress are made on those two things. But in terms of institution building, in terms of the rules and regulations, but because of the embedded weaknesses of the democracy itself, how democracy is practiced, the gains on the institution building on check and balances has been consistently weakened. Let me give you an example. One of the key institutions born out of the democratic transitions was the establishment of the National Anti-Corruption Commissions. And then for the first time in Indonesia, people will see the sitting minister was jailed. The army general, the police general, the member of the parliament was jailed. But later on, the elite, any kinds of elites, the anti-corruption commissions becoming their common enemy. And then they conspire to weaken the anti-corruption commissions. And that has happened for the past 10 years. Sorry, for the past 5-7 years. And then second example, Indonesia has what is called the Constitutional Court to provide check and balances, the place to review the existing law and regulations. And then because of the elites, the same Constitutional Court has been used by the previous president to allow to open the ticket for his son to be the vice president. So the elected president, the elected leader, produced by the consolidated democracy, those elected leaders, and he's not coming from the elite class, and then those democratically elected leaders, actually the one who initiated the tearing down of the gains achieved by the country in terms of institutions. Yeah, and that president was not also part of the establishment. So he was the ideal model of how democracy can create more equal opportunities. So the president is not just the son or the daughter of the previous president, not coming from the elite military families, not from the rich families, but he was just small entrepreneur from the region, not from the center. So he himself who initiated to weaken the anti-corruption commissions and to misuse the Constitutional Court to allow for his son to be the current vice president. So I'll stop there with the three key takeaways from Indonesia. And this is the problem of democratic consolidations. And before was about the problem with the risk of violent conflict and the temptations to authoritarian growth. So I believe that it is for the floor now how we can interpret that one, take the lessons or relevance for Bangladesh. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tajuddin, for your very thought-provoking presentation. As you said, the onus is on us how to interpret this result and how relevant this could be for our country and for our current situation. So with this note, I'd like to open the floor. Let's take free comments first. Then Sir will make the final comments. Then if I have anything, then I will add at the end. Thank you. And also we have a few guests online. So first taking the floor here, then I will go to online to take. So the floor is yours.
First, I'd like to thank Professor Dr. Zulfan for coming at BIDS, and also your presentation is very we find it very interesting because Bangladesh is going through the same transition. So after listening to your presentation, there are a couple of things which I couldn't understand about my country, but now I'm understanding a bit. One of the things I just wanted to ask you is I've been going through LinkedIn accounts for several weeks, and there is an article by Lowy Institute about understanding democratic erosion, where they actually said worldwide the democracy is losing its charm. People don't want to be ruled by democratic rules, democratic parties, because democracy itself is creating corruption, and people are losing faith in democratic institutions, and they gave five reasons for that. So when you say about like the consolidation of democracy, even in Indonesia or in Bangladesh, you also actually pointed out that there is a chance in Indonesia that maybe authoritarian government will come back. Is it because people are losing faith, or is it because democracy itself will not work in developing countries because we have low education and we have, other problems of developing countries, and we need actually benevolent dictators like us, what happened in Singapore or in Malaysia? Thank you.
Would you like to collect few questions first, or you wanna? Okay, the next one, please.
Hello, this is Golamuri Mujumdar, Senior Research Fellow BIDS. First of all, thank you for this interesting presentation. I have learned a few interesting lessons from this. First one probably is the word competitive authoritarianism. So it's a new thing for me. I have to think through this for a while to understand what it implies. I think I have a sense, but I would love to hear more about this if you could elaborate, probably with some examples. And another thing sort of catches my eyes is the idea that there is a new social contract. I'm really curious to know why that you consider it's a new social group. What is new in there, and why that newness matters? In fact, and why it should bother us, or how it could help that country perhaps consolidate democracy, or at least prevent any backsliding. The last point, when you say real power of the old elite class, I was thinking, okay, is that something we may see here in this country? So I'm not perhaps forcing you to act like a truth teller, but I'm trying to find out what analytical insights we might perhaps draw from the story that you have been telling us. So if you could pinpoint some points for us. Thank you.
I think that's enough. Enough. Yeah, very loaded question. Can one more? Okay, one more. Yes, sir, please, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you for this interesting presentation. I have few queries and observations. First of all, you talked about the similarities. One of the major, I would say that important similarity that both are Muslim countries. I think this is very important, and it creates the context of development. Now, having said that, I was very amazed to see one slide, which you have titled Suharto and the IMF, 1998. US dollar 43 billion bailout package. I was wondering why you are linking IMF bailout package with Suharto. As far as I know, from 1997, Asian economic crisis started. It started first in Thailand, then it was in Malaysia, then in Philippines and Indonesia. And each of these countries accepted money, USD, from IMF. And IMF, I was reading a paper by Stiglitz, The Insider's View, and he said that how IMF manipulated, compelled all these countries to take this money. So I was wondering why you are giving captions short on the IMF, because all these countries have accepted money for good or bad reasons or whatever. So this is one of my major observations and queries to you. Then when you were talking about 1998 revolution and then 2025, you didn't talk about money laundering, which is a significant problem for this country. Billions and billions of takas has been laundered outside the country in collaboration with the government in power. You know, we all know. So you didn't talk about that. Another thing I think is a very significant missed from your presentation is the role of military and the judiciary. And also you didn't talk about bureaucracy. The bureaucracy in Indonesia during the Suharto's time and later in 2025 revolution. Another thing that I was thinking, in one of the slides you said that electoral competitions without adequate checks and balances. Now, if there is an electoral competitions, I don't see any problem. If I compete with you, and if we have competition, and if the election is fair, for which you are fighting now, then where is the problem? So this slide is not clear to me. Why you say without adequate checks and balances? I'm very curious to know in bullet form what you mean by checks and balances. Okay? And finally, I will say, what is the point? In one of the slides, Indonesia in 2025, I'm sorry, I'm not sure whether I'm taking much time. I will take just 1 minute. Indonesia in 2025, you said that stagnant, then declined since 2014 or since 2019 at the edge of competitive authoritarianism. So I think that you need to expand this for the audience, why you say that it is a stagnant and what are the reasons for this stagnation. Thank you very much. I'm Professor Nurul Alam. I'm an adjunct professor of development studies at North-South University. I was formerly with full-time with Jahangirnagar University. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try my best I'll try my best in reasonably time. Otherwise, we can have another sessions. Okay, I'll start with the first one. This is what I said: the temptations to the benevolent autocrat. Easy to understand the complaint against the authoritarianism, and the whole world now is suffering from the grievances toward democracy. But I just want to say one point here. In the case of authoritarianism, there is no mechanism for that system to correct themselves. The only way for the authoritarian system is to break down, to collapse. Then you rebuild a new one. The good thing about democracy is they have the embedded mechanism to correct themselves. That's the hope. Things may slow down, things may get worse, but the construct of democracy is the system that has the mechanism to repair their own damage. So that's the hope. And then if you are saying that democracy is in decline in the US, it is up to the American people to repair themselves. So that's the good thing about democracy. So that's also the implications. Nothing is perfect. The elected leaders can be an authoritarian ruler. The elected leader was resulted from the democracy, can the one who killed democracy itself. It happens. Yeah. So nothing is taken for granted. I think I'll just stop there to say that democracy as a mechanism to repair their own damage or problems. And the next one about the competitive authoritarianism. Indonesia was said by the proper political scientists, I'm not proper political scientist, but I read political literature. This is about, they have the mechanism of elections. Oppositions are allowed to contest, but those in power will significantly weaken, will change the level of the playing fields. And actually what happened in the last elections in Indonesia, it was the case. But if we go, when I read what happened in Bangladesh in the past 2 elections, it is not competitive authoritarianism, even below that one. Because opposition was not allowed to contest, only one party can go to the elections, and then, so that's why if you look at the score, even lower. So the challenge now is how to rebuild democracy then. I think that's the example. And in the case of India, when you read the literature, India has been classified as competitive authoritarianism. Indonesia is just about to enter. You resonate that one with the index there, in the graph. And then the new social contract. Indonesia before 1998, for 30 years, Indonesia was governed by what is called vertical social contract, in the sense of authoritarian government. You like it or not, it was a kind of quote-unquote consent. So we need to understand Indonesia in 1965, and that this is what is called the Hobbesian bargain. The society will be willing to surrender their freedom for the sake of the socio-economic progress. So Indonesia was labeled as what is called the Hobbesian bargain. So it was stable for 32 years, but eventually any kinds of vertical social contract will be prone to break down unless the authoritarian contract benevolent. But the example of benevolent authoritarian ruler are very few. So cannot be treated as a rule, only exceptions. And exceptions cannot be used as the model. Reorganizing power. This is my own take for Indonesia. One was the complaint about Indonesia in 1998 was the leading political party that support the 30 years of the authoritarian regime. So Suharto has had 3 main pillars: the bureaucracy, the military, and one political party that he set up. And that political party is set to win all elections. And the problem was that political party was allowed to continue up until now. So one critic will say that that party should be banned. But it was not Golkar. That's Soeharto's party. Elections was stolen. The civil servant will organize the elections. Civil servant will have to vote for the Golkar party. Golkar party always won 75 to 80% of votes in every elections, set to win. And then
same happened here.
So there's similarities. But what happened in 1999, in the electoral reform, Golkar was not banned. So probably it was a mistake and then even that Golkar, the different factions within the party, they form a new political party. And the party of the current president of Indonesia is basically the splinter group of the Golkar party.
Like আমাদের এখানে রিফাইন আওয়ামী লীগ হচ্ছে না আইডিয়াটা
So you see the relevance here. So what happened in Indonesia is basically the process of reorganizing power of the all players. So that's what the example of the reorganizing power. What is the relevance for Bangladesh? I leave it to you. About the picture. Okay. Okay, I'll
Yeah, I will address that.
Yeah, okay.
Too much for him.
Yeah, okay, just the last one, check and balance.
I have to protect him also.
The last one, that's about the check and balances. Election is to select the winner. But the winner will have to be controlled. The basic setting of the check and balances is the control of corruptions or the divisions of power. What I can say in Indonesia, the control of corruptions has been seriously weakened, one, and the separations of power is not there. The parliament used to control the president, the executive, and all parties in parliament have been either coerced by the president or co-opted. Coerce or coercions or cooptations. Cooptations means share the bread, share the butter, share the plunders. Coercion means if you are not supportive of the president, the attorney office, the police will find out your wrongdoing. And everyone has their own wrongdoing. So coercions and cooptations. So that's the two examples of check and balances. But let me explain a little bit the institutional advance that Indonesia made for the
election commission there.
Yes, let me tell you about this one. In Indonesia, the election commission has done very good job in terms of administering the elections. But next to the elections commissions, Indonesia has also what is called the National Election Supervisory Body, supervising the work of the election commissions, supervising the political parties, supervising the role of the government. Elections Supervisory Body, from national government to provincial level and to sub-provincial level. Not only that, attached to that one, Indonesia also has what is called the Court for Elections Ethics. So, elections commissions, the administrator, the supervisory body, and the elections court for ethics of conduct of the elections. So this is check and balances within the conduct of the elections. Another check and balances about the economy. Another important institution set up after the transitions was the competitions commissions to supervise the monopoly. So the idea is there to put elements to institutionalize check and balances and to make sure that the separations of power. But eventually, you know, those at the elite, and then the elite, the politicians collude with those who has the money, and then eventually you have what is called elections for sale. You need investors, and then who would be the governor, who would be the president, even who would be the minister? The investors of the presidential elections will have the rights to nominate the ministers. The investor, can you imagine? The key funding, the key funders of the elections for the winning president will have the rights to nominate their own ministers. Then, so check and balance is basically to control the winner of the competitive elections. I think that will be in a very simplistic way.
Just one more question, right? Okay, Mahfouz, please.
Thank you. Thank you. In fact, taking cue from the founder of Peace and Conflict Studies, in fact, late Johan Galtung, and nowadays, I mean, one of the, in fact, promoters of quality peace is Peter Wallenstein. So, in the professor of university right now. So, they want to tell that if there are good institutions and if there are, in fact, regular elections, like, I mean, for democratic practices, so there will be an automatic peace in the society. But what we see from Indonesia, so after 1998, there was an election, but you see, I mean, you have already presented, there are 4 years, so these are full of conflicts. So afterwards, I mean, in fact, regular conflicts in your country. So, and if we see, it indicates that, I mean, the democracy is not foolproof. So there are a lot of problems. Democracy is not foolproof. So it has a lot of problems. If you don't have good, it's just to elected people. So this is the thing. But what we need quality institutions. Right now, and the interim government has basically 3 fundamental they have priorities. One is the reform, number 2 is trial, and number 3 is election. So before the elections, they want a series of reforms. So, in fact, in Bangladesh, there are in fact 11 reform commissions. They include a number of important reform commissions. The police, judicial, anti-corruption commission, constitution reform commission even, and in fact election reform commission. So, but what we see, I mean, in Indonesia, I don't see, I mean, you didn't mention any kind of reform, in fact, of important institution. So, do you have any kind of, in fact, thinking of undertaking important reforms? I mean, they're taking cue from Bangladesh. Thank you.
Can I say something? Because in the interest of time, I have to also go. Some of these are questions I will answer because I got some idea about because I have to make my own speech. Don't mind, you have the chair. Because I have to go to what's called Pradhan Upradeshta Karyalayate. I'm running out of time. So anyway, sorry, and thank you for organizing this. And some of the issues, because as I said, I work in Indonesia, I still have connection with Indonesia. I can answer on his behalf. Let me put idea, some of the things that I took note. You see what happens after a violent change of the government. And this is the similarity we need to understand in the context, like what is happening among the rise of conflict, mob justice, this, then we are comparing, we say, oh, the government is failing, this and that. This is a common picture in any revolution or uprising situation. And this, in Indonesia, you can see the rise of those things happen. But it came down. Some conflict will always happen. You cannot eliminate conflict is a part of life. Why it becomes violent? That's the issue. Okay? How do you mediate conflict without violence? democracy has the beauty. It is the only institution with all the faults it has. It has a mechanism to resolve differences in conflicts without violence. So that's why the attraction, why people are attracted towards democracy. Okay, in having the intrinsic value of democracy. I will come to that again. You know, democracy has failed also. Hitler was elected. He came to the election, proper election. So having a proper election does not guarantee that the elected leader will not become dictator. Erosion of democracy happens. Consolidation of democracy is a continuous process. That's what you have to understand. You cannot be complacent. Okay, we have all the good institutions, Mahfouz mentioned. Indonesia did all those institutions. He mentioned 4 anti-corruption commission, very strong. Being able to send to jail a sitting minister. A sitting minister going to jail. You will see this thing happen in some development, maybe in my other meeting. Sorry. So, yeah, so it's a continuous process. For the election, you see, we have not only election commission, watchdog over election commission, and a separate institution to look at the disputes, because otherwise a conflict of interest. You know what we have here, one election commission, that's it. We have to learn the lesson. Because if there is a complaint against election commission, it is investigative. It can't happen. You have a conflict of interest. So that's why election commissions, okay, thought through this. Election commission is only to administer election. What happened in Jahangirnagar, for example? There is no dispute about the election commission itself. Who is investigating? Election commission itself is investigating. You will not say, oh, I made a mistake. So they have a watchdog over it. And if there is any complaint coming, watchdog is also a part of the game. They fail. So they cannot resolve this dispute. They have a different code. And to investigate and give the judgment. Very strong. But what happened? This is the thing. The elites reorganized themselves under different names. That's why that's why sorry, Macedon said the revolution is continuous. If you don't do these things continuously, you don't want to give out your privileges. Be organized. Come with a different name, refine only this and that, and we will come back. Okay? And some existing parties will help because this is the elite arrangement. And this is what the lesson we learned from Indonesia. The president, last one, was not part of the establishment, a common man being elected. Everybody thought, this is the beauty of the election, democracy. Someone like this, without any privilege. He was a very good governor of Jakarta. First he was a mayor, did a good job, and so on and so forth. But now, he himself started manipulating institutions, using same institutions, changing the rule to allow his son to become vice president. And he made a coalition with the previous regime, the son-in-law of Suharto, who came back as the refined man, who was actually responsible for genocide in East Timor. Directly participated. And you can see the danger in Bangladesh of that happening in front of your eyes. in front of your own eyes, happening. In Indonesia, it too, that to happen from 1908 to until now. And what is happening? Very dangerous here. Because of those institutions they put, it took that long. That long. You see? So this is one thing. The consolidation of democracy is a continuous process. The civil society got to be extremely, extremely alert all the time. You cannot become complicit. You could see in what is happening in UK. These now they are Palestine action. We have now restriction on position on protest. You have to take police permission. You can have meeting outside the city, not in the traditional Hyde Park anymore, or in big circles. With this brutality, never thought about they are killed in UK. So democracy decline. That we said, first, keep still. We don't have the courage to be, but it was funded by the government, they were from here. So that's what it is. You have to be very careful. The laundering of money, he did mention patriotic corruption versus non-patriotic corruption. Because what happened in Southeast Asia, especially in Thailand and in Indonesia, these two countries, not in Philippines, Suharto, for example, never in his life, after he became president, he went abroad, except one, to a conference in Australia. And King William, the previous king who died, and his son in Thailand, never went abroad after he became the king. He said, "This is my country. If I am sick, I have to be treated here. My children will study here." So he invested in that country to have the best hospitals. Best hospitals are not the private ones where you go, are the public ones in Thailand. It has to have a state. What is happening here in this country? The first president or prime minister of Bangladesh, Mr. Mujibur Rahman, a simple operation to decide this, he went to England. He did not have trust in the doctors of this country or institute of this country. From the start, we did that. The first election here was weak. You can see. The first election. Extrajudicial killing during that time. 30,000 the best estimate. Short killing 500,000 people. You can see the parallel. 500,000 people perished. This is the danger of authoritarianism. As you mentioned, democracy, which is true. Ask the question, is a country fit for democracy? Famous Lee hypothesis. Ayub Khan said the same thing. Sukarno said the same thing. Because they know, but how do you get a benevolent dictator? Tell me. How do you get? You put someone, he can become a dictator. Someone like Sheikh Mujibur will become a tyrant. Judicial king will create his own personal army called Timani. Document did not take over under the state. The document took over under him, under his name. Okay. How did it explode? So these are the facts from Bangladesh. That's why I said I'll answer those questions. So the thing is, the country becomes fit through democracy. Despite all these faults, you have less risk of getting stuck in that kind of situation. Yeah. So because we could do this, we were complacent at that time. We thought, okay, he is the father, he will not do anything wrong. You cannot believe anyone. You have to be extremely vigilant for that. Now coming to that picture of Suharto and IMF. And some factual corrections, Nuran made. The Asian crisis did not start from Japan. It started from Korea. It entered through Korea. So Korea was the first country to be hit, very strong hit, but least affected for Korean people's solidarity. Ban Ki-moon was the Secretary General. He was the foreign minister at that time. His wife went to the central bank with all her money, surrender to the world. That this is the crisis for the country. This is our nation. Take all the gold, the resource. Following her, it was a mountain of gold that Korean Central Bank received. They did not know what to do. So that was the solidarity of a nation. The nationalism is very important. We will not let this country to be ravaged by others. So Korea said, Malaysia did not enter IMF program. Thailand did not enter Malaysia, the IMF program. It's only Indonesia. 1,500 conditionality was given. And that picture shows how humiliating it was. And this is in the collective memory of Southeast Asian country. The Southeast Asian country will never go to IMF ever in their history. This is in the collective memory of Southeast Asia. And that's why they have created alternative system and sitting in Singapore to come to help each other if any crisis happens like that. Okay, so this is in brief why that picture was shown, that I will call them all others development partners, or whom they come, they don't come with open heart to help you. And 1,500 we counted it, 1,500 people used to sit around. I was part of it. Sit around the table like this. What is your condition? Without thinking whether it's possible, whether it's contradictory, whether it's this. Just they had a chair was adding from different agencies, 27 agencies at that time, around the donor agencies. And you added that if happened in front of our eyes. And you gave to the president, sign it. That was the letter of credit. And that's why he was watching like this. That is the humiliation they had to take. A darling of the West, he was put in the power by the US, the bulwark for anti-communist movement. He was allowed to kill 500,000 leaders to kill Indonesian American. The beginning was like this, bloody beginning. And then time came, there's abandoned. Now coming back, one thing, dictators. South Korea, you had a benevolent dictator. You had in Taiwan, you had a benevolent dictator. You had a benevolent dictator in Singapore and Malaysia. Malaysia is in trouble still. You see, become trap plus political crisis is still going on. Singapore is a different case. Islam is like a multinational corporation. Okay, so we don't compare. The country, why South Korea was attacked by these speculators in 19 and survived? Because they successfully democratized in the 80s. They went through revolution, march, their benevolent dictator was assassinated. They went through a lot of trouble in the late 70s and early 80s. Then they successfully democratized and consolidated their democracy. You could see they could even impeach their president. You see how country can become fit through democracy? The same happened in Taiwan. These are the two countries in this region which so far have successfully democratized and can withstand the storm, and because that creates the national unity, shape of the country, shape of policy. Okay, is it clear now to you?
Thank you, sir. Actually, sorry that we cannot allow online guests to have how many of them, 2 or 3 of them there. I'm really sorry for that. It's an actually South Asian economy 111 course for us. It's a good understanding of what really happened in many South Asian economies, from crisis to democracy, from democracy to crisis. For me, I think there's one major takeaway. The thing is that most of the developing countries, mostly populous countries who aspire to have a functional democracy, are likely to go through many phases of democracy, high democracy, low democracy, and to some extent authoritarian government. But the point is, we should know how to go back to that earlier path. So there will be some slides, there will be some pitfall, there will be some bad time for us. But we should know how to go back to democracy again, democratically, not through undemocratic means. I think that's the lesson that we should always learn. With that note, I would like to thank Professor Tajuddin again, and many thanks for coming over here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, it is for you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Our journals.
Yeah, thank you. Bangladesh.
Right. You don't get free, man.
Thank you.
There is no free lunch.
What's your name?
Kazi.
দেখা হতো
হ্যাঁ, প্রশ্নের টাকা
Sorry. Thank you all. আমি অলরেডি I have